And welcome back once again to the Zone Blitz Draft Report. I'm Eric Sandelin. I've got a couple of things I want to talk about today, one of which I actually originally intended to do prior to the draft, but the timing didn't really work out. Isn't life a beautiful thing? But at the end of the day, I think the two topics actually blend together fairly well. That one segues rather nicely into the other, I think. So we'll just dive in. The first thing that I want to talk about is the two competing philosophies of drafting and where I stand on the issue. Essentially, you have either drafting best available athlete or drafting for need. And certainly you can blend the two styles together to a point. And that, I think, ultimately is where I wind up falling, although I certainly will subscribe to the drafting for need philosophy more so than drafting best available athlete. I've just never really bought into the idea of drafting best player on the board, regardless of what position he plays, while ignoring a potential need somewhere on the team. That's just never made any sense to me. The people who support best available athlete will tell you that what you are doing is constantly upgrading the overall talent level of your ball club, and that you are generating tremendous depth. And certainly in today's NFL, where injuries can pile up in a heartbeat, having good depth makes sense. But to me, not at the expense of filling an obvious need somewhere else on the starting lineup. And so somebody who supports best available athlete might, for example, have a couple of really good quarterbacks on the team already. Their turn to pick comes up. Best player on the board is another quarterback. They go grab that quarterback. In the meantime, they've got a crying need somewhere else, and they're ignoring that need completely. And to me, that just makes no sense whatsoever. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Maybe an extreme one for the sake of making a point, but a hypothetical example nonetheless. You have a team with two quarterbacks that you grade out on your grading system at a 10.0. And that's not as unlikely as it may seem. If you recall the San Francisco 49ers back in the day when they had Joe Montana and Steve Young, on the team at the same time, it can happen. You've got two quarterbacks, you grade them both at a 10.0, but your best wide receiver you only grade out at a 7.5. Your chance to draft comes up. There's another quarterback on the board that you grade at a 10.0. There's a wide receiver on the board that you grade at a 9.5. The individual who believes in the best available athlete theory is going to take that quarterback. The individual, such as myself, who believes draft for need, is going to take the wide receiver. And I would do that because, yeah, that's great. You've got another quarterback on your team who you grade out at a 10.0. He's never going to get on the field. He's already got two other guys in front of him that are just as good as he is. Barring catastrophic injury, that guy's never going to see the field. He's buried on the depth chart. In the meantime, had you taken that wide receiver, that 9.5 wide receiver, even if all he ever did was get on the field for one play and catch one pass for 5 yards, he's still giving you more production than that quarterback would have given you. So, to me, there's only two times where drafting the best available athlete makes sense. You're either so good that you really don't have any needs anywhere on your team, and all you're doing now is drafting for depth. You're drafting for the future. You're anticipating that player X is going to retire at the end of the season or a couple seasons down the road. Or you're looking at your contractual situations and you know that some players are coming up who are going to be free agents. And instead of investing all that salary cap money in those guys, why not have some younger players in place ready to take over when they leave? Or, on the one hand, you're so good, you don't have any needs, you can afford to draft best available athlete. Or, on the other hand, you're so bad that you could take a punter in the first round, and it would make sense. You've got holes everywhere. But the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of teams in the NFL are not that good, and they're not that bad. You can look at the 49ers, the Ravens, the Falcons, the Patriots, the Texans, the Broncos. Take your pick, the Packers. You can look at any of these teams, And they're all playoff caliber teams. They're all potentially Super Bowl caliber teams. None of them are without at least one crying need somewhere on the team. And on the flip side, you can take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs or the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Jaguars or the Arizona Cardinals or the New York Jets or whoever. Teams that really don't look like they're even going to sniff the playoffs. They've still got some positions of strength somewhere. Some position groups that they could ignore and move on from. So for me, if I was running a team and I was getting ready for a draft, I would be drafting for need, but I would certainly have that best available player idea floating somewhere in the background. Basically, the way I would do it is this. I would take a look at my team and I would identify what my needs are. And then once I've done that, I would prioritize those needs. So let's say I've said, you know what, I need a quarterback, I need a center, and I need an outside linebacker. Okay, quarterback, center, outside linebacker. What do I need more? Well, really, I need a quarterback more than I need the other two. And I need that linebacker more than I need that center. Okay, so now on the surface, it looks like in the first round, I'm going to take a quarterback. The second round, I'm going to take an outside linebacker. Third round, I'm going to take a center. And I realize I'm simplifying things here. I'm not accounting for trading up or trading down or anything like that yet. So I've identified my needs. I've prioritized my needs. The next thing I need to do is I need to take a look at the depth of talent at each position group in the draft class and possibly readjust my priorities. So, for example, let's say the upcoming draft is loaded at quarterback, but it's quite thin at outside linebacker. I'm going to readjust my priorities, and I'm going to take that linebacker in the first round, and I'll take the quarterback in the second round. Why? Because I can afford to wait on a quarterback. The draft's loaded with them. If I don't get an outside linebacker as soon as I possibly can, I'm very likely not going to be able to get one who's going to be able to contribute for me. So I'll readjust my priorities. So identify needs, prioritize needs, readjust the priorities based on the depth of talent available at each position. And finally, get value for my picks. This is the argument that the best available athlete proponent will usually throw at the people who believe in drafting for need. Well, if you just draft for need, you could wind up reaching for a player. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. If I'm making sure that I get value for my pick, then I'm not going to reach. You need to be, when it comes to getting value for your pick, you need to know not only what do you grade these players at, but also you need to have at least a basic idea of what does the rest of the league grade these players at. And know that, yeah, I should take this guy in the second round, or you know what, I can probably wait until the fourth because the rest of the league really isn't as high on this guy as I am. That kind of thing. You've got to be aware of what the rest of the league thinks about player X, player Y, player Z, etc. And you also need to be flexible. You've got to realize that, you know what, the player I really want, the rest of the league isn't that high on. I can probably afford to trade back right now if I can find a partner willing to trade with me. That's always, of course, the concern. You hear about it all the time now. Whoever's got the number one pick, the Chiefs in this past draft, for example, the Chiefs should trade back. They should trade back. With who? You've got to find somebody who's willing to trade up with you. And if you can't do that, now you're in a bit of a bind. Maybe you do have to reach now at this point. But anyway, if possible, if at all possible, be flexible. Be willing to trade back. Be willing to trade up. Whatever it takes. But make sure you get value for your pick. So, identify your needs. Prioritize your needs. Readjust those priorities based on the depth of talent available at each position. And make sure you get value for your pick. Never, 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 never reach. Reaching will kill you. That's a quote, by the way. Jimmy Johnson to Peter King many, many years ago, back when Jimmy Johnson was coaching the Dallas Cowboys. King wrote a great book, again, many years ago now, called Inside the Helmet. And he spends a fair amount of time in the book about talking with Jimmy Johnson and sort of getting in Johnson's head about drafting philosophy and so forth. And that was something that Jimmy Johnson, who, let's be honest, was the true architect of those Cowboys Super Bowl teams of the 90s. Not Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones wrote the checks. Jimmy Johnson built those teams. It was all about drafting, and it was all about getting value for your picks, taking the right players at the right times, and that's how I would do it. So that's part one of what I wanted to talk about today, and that was the part that I had hoped to be able to do before the draft. Again, timing didn't work out. Oh well, here we are today. The second part, which I would have waited until after the draft to do anyway, is the whole idea of grading drafts. And you will hear a lot of people talk about how it's foolish to grade a draft the day after it's happened, or even to try to grade a draft as it happens. You know, pick by pick by pick. This pick made sense. This was a bad pick. Why'd they do this? Why'd they do that? That was a really smart move. Way to go. You'll hear a lot of people say it doesn't make sense to do that, that you need to wait at least 3 years or so before you can really accurately grade a draft, to which I say, to put it politely, horse pucky. You can grade a draft whenever you want, as far as I'm concerned. You can grade a draft as it happens. You can grade a draft the day after the draft is over. Why can't you? Why can't you do that? It all depends upon what your rubric is. What are you basing your grading on? If you're basing your grading on what have these prospects done for you, did they live up to expectations? Did they exceed expectations? Did they fail to live up to expectations? Sure, yeah, you need to wait 3 to 5 years so that these prospects have actually put a body of work together at the NFL level. If that's not your rubric, though, then you can grade the draft as it happens. If your rubric is, for example, what I just described, did they fill needs? Did they fill the right needs at the right time? Did they get value for their selection? Then, yeah, you can grade the draft as it happens. Why not? And whenever I grade a team's draft, that's generally what I do. I will look at Team X before the draft is about to happen and say to myself, I think they need to fill positions X, Y, and Z. And I think this position is more important to fill than this position, and so forth and so on down the line. And then as the draft happens, I'll think to myself, yes or no, was that the right player to take at that time? Did they fill a need? Did they fill the right need? The player that they just picked to fill that need, should he have been taken at that point in the draft? If the answer to all those questions is yes, well, that was a great pick. If the answer to all those questions was no, well, that was a stupid pick. It all depends upon what your rubric is. And so, for example, being a homer, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. You take a look at the Falcons draft this year. There were things that I liked about it. There were things I didn't like about it. I liked the Desmond Trufant pick. I don't know that they really needed to trade up to get him. He quite likely would have been there, I think, if they had just stayed pat and let him come to them. But Tom Dimitroff has often displayed a penchant for identifying an individual player and saying, I'm getting this guy no matter what. He did it with Julio Jones. He did it to a lesser extent this year with Trufant. But anyway, Trufant made sense. Cornerback was a big position in need for the Falcons going into the draft. They had lost Brent Grimes. They had lost Dante Robinson. They had lost Chris Owens. They needed cornerbacks. Trufant was worth taking in the latter third of the first round. So they got value for the pick. Robert Alford in the second round. I like the pick. Another cornerback. They might have been able to get him around later, but again, Dimitroff probably wasn't willing to take that chance. I liked the Levine Toilolo pick. This, I'm pretty sure, is going to be Tony Gonzalez's last year in the NFL, no matter what. If he was 95% sure he was going to retire last year, this year he's done. Bank on it. So getting a young tight end who can learn how to play the position at the NFL level behind arguably the greatest tight end of all time, yeah, that pick made sense. Maliki Goodman in the fourth round, yep, they needed a defensive end. They needed to upgrade their pass rush. I thought that pick made sense. Stanley Mapanga later on, was he worth the pick? Yes. Is he going to make the team? I doubt it. I mean, now the Falcons are carrying something like 6 or 7 defensive ends, and he's probably number 6 or number 7. So I doubt that he winds up making the team, to be honest with you. The quarterback that they took, I didn't think was a good pick at all. Yeah, I think they need depth behind Matt Ryan, but I would rather see them get a veteran quarterback, somebody who's played in the league for a while. If Matt Ryan goes down, I don't want a 7th-round rookie stepping in to take his place. Now I'm starting to draw a blank on the players that the Falcons took, and I'm sitting here calling myself a Falcons fan. 2 cornerbacks, 2 defensive ends, a tight end, quarterback, 2 safeties. They took 2 safeties. And I like the Zeke Motta pick. I think Zeke Motta will make the team. At the very least, contribute on special teams. The other kid that they took, Kamal Ishmael, I know he was the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year and so forth, but he looked more like a undrafted free agent type of guy as opposed to a draftable pick. And again, I doubt whether he even makes the team. And a couple of other things that disappointed me about the Falcons draft is that they didn't draft an offensive tackle and they didn't draft an outside linebacker. And those are 2 positions that I think the Falcons needed to address. They have, in my opinion, nobody on the roster right now who can play left tackle other than Sam Baker. And Sam Baker is injury prone, and he has thus far failed to live up to expectations as a former first-round pick. So if something happens and he goes down with an injury, or his play just falls off that far, as it has in the past, where do they go? Who do they plug in to take his place? I would have liked to have seen the Falcons invest a mid-round pick somewhere to take somebody who's capable of playing left tackle. A huge Achilles heel of the Falcons all year long last year, although it really didn't start getting noticed by the media until the playoffs. A huge hole for the Falcons is that they don't have a linebacker other than Sean Weatherspoon who can cover at all. The Falcons were constantly getting victimized by good tight ends. And it really showed up in the playoffs. Vernon Davis in the championship game, Zach Miller in the divisional round playoff game against the Seahawks. And the Falcons didn't do anything to address the linebacker position. And yeah, Brian Banks is a nice feel-good story for those of you who aren't familiar. This is a guy who was a highly rated high school player who never got the chance to play in college because he was accused of rape and went to jail. And it turned out that the accusation was false. And now he's getting the opportunity to play at an NFL level. Last year he tried out for a handful of teams, didn't quite make it. This year the Falcons are giving him a chance to play. And, hopefully he does make it. But to bank on him to be the solution to this problem is a long shot. He hasn't played football in 5 years. He's in great shape by all accounts, and he apparently acquitted himself well in the team's mini camps just after the draft, but you're taking a huge chance to think that this guy is going to be able to step up and replace either Akeem Dent at middle linebacker or Steve Nicholas at strong side linebacker. So when it's all said and done, I would probably give the Falcons a draft grade of somewhere in the C+ to B range. They addressed the cornerback position with a couple of nice picks. Toilolo was a very nice pick, I think. Malika Goodman was probably a good pick. Zeke Motta, I think, was a good pick. Sean Renfield, the kid that they drafted to play quarterback in the 7th round. Yeah, getting him in the 7th round was decent value, but I think that was the wrong position to address. Like I said, they didn't address left tackle. They didn't address outside linebacker. So, yeah, I would probably say like a C+ to a B, somewhere in that area. Again, using the rubric of, did you fill needs? Did you fill the right needs at the right times? Did you get value for your selection? Did you fill all of your needs? So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And again, I welcome your comments or questions. Feel free to set them up down there in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time.